Cachamaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to our 16th Randomize show, the 90th edition of the GeoGearHeads. I'm Daryl W4 with the Bad Cop, excited as always to be tackling another series of several topics, most from the audience. But more than that, we're excited to really be giving our first real effort to trying out the new Google Plus Hangout on Air live Q&A function tonight. So if you're watching live, you can now ask questions by typing them into the question field. You can vote up the questions from other viewers, and we'll keep an eye on those, pick some of those to be included during the show. Once we're done, those questions will show up on the YouTube video, and you can click on a question to jump to that point in the video. It's really pretty cool all the way around, and I'm anxious to really try it out this week. But we have a couple of more cool topics coming up in the next few weeks, so Bad Cop, why don't you fill us in on those?
Oh, I will. Just try to stop me. So let's start off with a note that while we try the live Q&A for the next couple of shows, we may not really be able to make use of them like we can on a randomized show. We've actually been getting a few questions lately about how to get good coordinates for your geocache placement or just waypoints to be used for anything. So sometime in the next several weeks, we're going to dedicate an episode on ways to get good coordinates. Daryl's been working to schedule a guest noted for his work on some excellent, are you ready for this? Halloween caching events. You believe it? It's time for Halloween already? So if they get that worked out, next week's show might be on Halloween caching events. For the first show of October, John Robb of Cache at Night joins us to talk about placing night caches. Really good information if you want to place one of those creepy night caches for Halloween. So in the week after that, we have noted podcaster, early podcaster, mind you, he's been around for quite some time, Rob Walsh of Podcast 411, Today in iPhone, and Libsyn, to talk about the history of podcasting. So that's 4 weeks of varied topics. If you have anything you'd like to add, ask, or throw in any comments for any of these shows, email us at geogearheads@cachamaniacs.com or call them into our voicemail line. That's 206-350-3647. So let us know what you're doing to get good coordinates for those hides. We'd also like to hear about any great night caches you've done or hidden. But Daryl, what we should really ask is, what do you do to get good coordinates for those night caches that you've hidden? There we go. That's what we need to ask for.
Indeed.
So for any of those, or anything else, because I'm thinking we're ready to have another randomized show in another 4 to 5 weeks, call in to 206-350-3647 or email us, geogearheads@cachamaniacs.com. You can even send us an email of an audio file. Most smartphones, well, all smartphones these days, will allow you to record a file. You can email that directly to us, so we hear it in your voice with your intonation. And you know what? You can even pronounce your name properly, because we may not do that right. So if you want to watch us live, we're on the Google Hangouts, Google Plus Hangouts on Air, Thursday nights, 6:10 p.m. Pacific, 9:10 p.m. Eastern. That's currently 1:10 a.m. on Fridays UTC. But remember that it won't be long before we're changing to the end of daylight savings. So keep up with those times, and we'll be here for you.
Yeah, time zones. Man, now you got me to where I can't.
Yeah,
talk.
sorry.
Time zones are so confusing. We've been running into a lot of issues with that lately with some of our guests and clients and stuff. So, it's a little confusing, but you can always download the MP3 podcast or watch the shows on YouTube, and then you get to call in like this listener did.
Hello, this is Dudley Grunt, and I was listening to GeoGearHeads episode 88, and there was some discussion about the Friends feature. And I have found one useful aspect of it. At least the app CGeo, when you pull up a cache and you can look at the logs, You can also go one page over and see just the logs of your friends based on the actual friends on the geocaching.com. So that's one thing, let's pull over and say, okay, here's some people I know, and here's what they've done. Even if they had found the cache long ago, their logs will be right there. It's minimal, but it's at least one feature I found that has taken advantage of the friends list. All right, well, thanks. Happy trails.
That's really pretty cool because I haven't seen anything that uses the friends list.
Yeah, I think it's rather ironic that the only major caching app to not use the live API is the one that actually takes advantage of that feature. But we also got,
isn't it?
Yeah, we also got a comment from Ed to Ed on the same thing. So did you want to read that real quick?
Certainly. Ed to Ed wrote in, on a recent show, you featured a question about what benefit the geocaching friends feature could be. Well, I found one. When using the CGeo geocaching app for Android, you can get an extra panel of information on a geocache that contains just the log entries for that cache from your friends, if any have logged it. This can be useful if you're struggling to find a cache and need to phone a friend. Or it can even spur you on to search harder for the cache because if they found it, then I surely can find it too. Beyond this one feature, I've not found any other use for the geocaching friends. And that's exactly right. Phone a friend is a great thing that you can look at their logs and say they found it. So.
Yeah, no, that's the only thing I think that anyone's really found so far for usefulness of the friends feature. So. Yeah, pretty interesting. But talking about the phones and stuff, there's an interesting proposal that came to light about, 2 weeks ago from the guys at Phone Blocks. So we'll link to that in the show notes if you guys want to read up on this interesting thing. But Badcap, you were actually kind of interested about that.
I like this idea. Phone blocks. A phone only lasts a couple of years before it breaks or comes obsolete, or even you break it. So often it's just one part of the phone that died, but we throw the whole thing away since it's almost impossible to repair or upgrade. Phone block is made of detachable blocks. The blocks are connected together on a base, which locks everything together into a single solid phone. So if a block breaks, you can replace it, or if it's getting old, you can upgrade it. So I don't know how popular or accepted this will become, but I really like this idea. So if you want an upgrade, just purchase a replacement block. You need more storage? Upgrade that block. You need more computing power? Swap the processor out. No need to sign up for a whole new 2-year contract just to have the latest phone. Now, you can use the same platform to make devices other than phones. So if you want to build a camera or a dedicated MP3 player or video player, you can do that as well. So Daryl, what I was thinking, we could make a GPSR out of these blocks. That way, we can add Bluetooth and Wi-Fi to it and customize it just the way we want. We could get that all-day battery life we want out of it, or throw in more storage to cover, every geocache in the country.
Yeah, it is a very interesting concept. I'd love to see what becomes of this. I wouldn't hold my breath that this is actually going to come to anything, though. It's it's a long shot, I think, and what you're probably going to end up with, despite the best efforts, this is going to end up costing a lot more because you have a bunch of these little modules that you have to create, and packaging up each one of those, I have to imagine, costs a lot more once you get it, assembled, than just buying the phone outright.
That may be, but I think it could catch on in certain markets, but who knows? This probably all just stems from my love of Lego as a child.
That could be. This reminds me a lot of the custom-built PC market, and look what happened to that.
Well, good point.
But talking about the phones, of course, the big news last week was the iPhone 5S and the 5C. But really, what I think we really want to talk about a little bit on this show is the M7 processor and the fact that it's 64-bit.
Yes.
But the M7 processor really is intriguing the more I'm reading about that. For those of us who use things like The Fitbit, it kind of can replace the Fitbit completely, if the software is available, without killing the battery. That M7 processor allows it to track the motion of the device without firing up the processor. So I don't know a whole lot about how it actually works, and I don't think there's a whole lot that's actually come out about it. But some of the information that's come out is pretty impressive. One of the reports that I caught was saying that it could actually shut down the GPS, shut down all of the sensors and everything that take all that power, except for the M7. And just based on the readings of the M7, it can actually get a better reading as you're driving as to where you currently are than the cell phone triangulation accuracy would be. So it fires up the GPS every so often, recalibrates itself essentially, and then shuts it down. So I can just imagine how much better that's going to end up being on battery performance.
I can see that as well, but we may end up with something like the old Oregon problem, where as long as you're moving, it's pretty good, but when you stop, it still thinks you're moving for a moment until it fires up that GPS and gets a fix.
Yeah, that could be. But the whole point is the only time it's really going to rely on that is when it's actually shut down. So if you've got the screen on and you're doing nav like with the Apple Maps or Google Maps or your GPS or your geocaching software, it should have that GPS fired up and it's going to get real readings. This is just so that when you fire it up, you know how you and I both play Wallaby, and you know how you end up with these really erroneous locations when you first start it up and load that list. Well, in theory, this will take care of that problem, and now you're going to have very good fixes, better than you'd get off that initial triangulation that you're seeing for that reload on Wallaby that first time. So that's where I'm really excited, is just imagine being able to, hey, I want to go find this cache now, fire it up, and it knows within, we'll say 150 feet where you are. It's not going to position you over on the other side of the block now. So it's going to be much, much faster at getting that fix, and it's going to be better once it does find the GPS signals. It's going to be a lot better at a quick acquisition and a more accurate reacquisition because of that M7 processor.
So do you think this built-in processor is going to replace a lot of the external sensors? You mentioned the Fitbit, but I'm thinking like the Nike Plus and other things. Obviously not heart rate monitors, but activity monitors.
I think it is going to reduce the demand for those, with the exception that so many of those are providing the feedback that the active folks want. Things like that Nike Fuel Band have the feedback right there on the band, so you don't have to go fumbling for your wallet or for your smartphone or anything like that. And if you're running, it's strapped to your arm. You don't want to go and screw around with it. A lot of people put it in a bike bag if they're actually cycling and they're just using the output of the various devices. So this is where that iWatch Pebble kind of concept comes out, and this may actually be the first step to that. And because Apple's packing that M7 into the phone and relying on that, I could see maybe a stripped-down iWatch that has more like the Pebble and less like the Gear Watch, Galaxy Gear, yeah. So it could actually be a lot better on the battery than what we thought it could be. So there's a lot of exciting things that can happen because of this new M7 processor, and who knows, they might even incorporate that into the watch as their sensor for taking on the Fitbit, the Nike, the Withings products. So I think that that's something to keep an eye on for that market as well. And I believe it was Fitbit has actually said that they are going to come out with an app that supports the M7 and allows the user to replace their actual hardware with just the software solution. But
interesting.
The problem being, if you're going to have something like that pedometer, you've got to have it on your waist the whole time.
Right.
if you put that down, it's not counting steps. So there's still an advantage to those small little, pedometer kind of devices.
And I check my pedometer all the time, for steps, for flights of stairs. I was going to call them steps too, because they are, but different kind of steps. Just to see where I am during the day, to see if I've been active enough. So now, what model phones does this M7 processor come in?
Well, right now it's only on the 5S, which is also the only phone that's a 64-bit. No one has 64-bit out on the market yet. It's only the iPhone 5S that has a 64-bit, and really nothing's going to use that as, basically the down low on it right now. The 64-bit is supported by iOS 7. There are going to be some 64-bit apps out there, but really it's too early to get any benefit out of it. So if you're looking at buying it because it's a 64-bit phone, don't.
Exactly.
Buy it because of the other stuff. This is not something that is going to be an issue for most people.
Not in the short term. Buy it because you can get it in gold, but not because it's 64-bit.
Yeah. Now, that said, this is laying the foundation. In another year or two, we are going to start seeing the benefits of having that 64-bit. So without this foundation, we can't take the next step. So that's all this is. Don't get excited about this one. Get excited for what's coming after it.
Next, yeah. So would you advise against getting an iPhone 5C with the current 32-bit processor?
Absolutely not. And really, the iPhone 5C is a upgraded 5. So even for those of us with an iPhone 5, the 5C is a good replacement. I wouldn't recommend upgrading from a 5 to a 5C. But if you're looking at replacing it because you dropped it in the toilet, well, the 5C is very close. It has a bigger battery, not by much, but a little bit.
A little bit.
And everyone that I've heard talk about that plastic back, polycarbonate back, has said it is really, really done well. It feels substantial. It doesn't have that flimsy feel that most of the other plastic phones do. And a lot of the people I've talked with who are like road warriors are very excited about that because they've scratched up their 5 so badly that they want something that can take a little bit more abuse without the case.
Right. And, if you're worried about scratching it, go get a case. They're inexpensive. They're going to keep your phone looking nice. But a scratched phone still works just as good as one in a case.
Yeah, and I have to get the case just so that I have a more substantial target and something that's not as slippery.
Yes.
These phones have gotten so slick that it's hard to hold on to them in so many situations that I can't work without a case anymore. Plus, when I go out caching, I always have a battery case that I throw on there just to give it that extra time. And with the iPhone 5, if I watch the battery, as we've talked about on some of the other shows, I can get a full day out of the iPhone and one battery case. Now, that's really managing the battery, but I can do it.
Right. And, yeah, exactly. I think this polycarbonate case is going to be slicker than what we currently have. I think it's going to be harder to hold.
I do too, but they also came out with their, with the genuine Apple cases for them, so that's always an option.
The Connect 4 case?
Yeah. And they're really designed around the colors from iOS 7, and I don't recommend upgrading to iOS 7 yet, but I understand that you have.
Yes, I went ahead and upgraded my phone to iOS 7. And for me, for the most part, it's been fine. Of course, there's a huge learning curve, but that's going to happen whether I do it now or I do it later. So the only app that I have that is flaky is Wallaby, but there's a fix coming out for that. Everything else seems rather stable.
Yeah, Wallaby has a fix coming. It's been submitted to the App Store, but the problem is it's just so tough right now because Apple is inundated with all these updates. I want to say the day before the iOS 7 was due to drop, I had something like 40 or 50 updates.
Exactly, I did
You
too.
know, not all of those were on any one of my devices, but you go into iTunes where you've got all those apps, and I was getting just update after update after update, and it got to be silly.
Mm-hmm.
And there are still some of the apps that I use that have not yet come to the point of saying that they're iOS 7 ready.
One of my apps updated saying it's finally compatible with the iPhone 5's larger screen. Like, really? A whole year. Good for you.
Yeah.
At work, our Wi-Fi was brought down to its knees with people downloading iOS 7.
I can believe it. And iOS 7, there were a couple of stories about it being the quickest adoption. And I have to say, I've never seen iPhone users that anxious to risk an update.
Mm-hmm.
People were running out. I was talking with all sorts of people saying, "Oh, I got to get iOS 7." So as much as people have been complaining it's such a departure, iOS 7 being such a departure from iOS 6 that people were going to jump ship, I have to say I've never seen people this excited over an operating system for a phone. Even when the original iPhone came out, people didn't seem to be that excited about the product. They were a little bit more hesitant. This time everyone's jumping in with both feet and just doing it. So I think they really do have a hit. I'm not as fond of it as some other people, but even the people I know who hate the new look, with all those colors and the flat design, they just jumped on it. They wanted to have it immediately. So there's a lot of people on iOS 7 already. The update, which should take minutes, was taking people several hours to download because of it. So another good reason to hold off, wait for a couple of weeks, let the apps settle down, let everyone get their bugs worked out before you go and upgrade, and you'll also have faster download times when you finally do. Right.
So the iOS 7 for the iPhone is about 800 megs. It's about a gig for the iPad. So it's a whopping download.
Yeah, it is big. And one of the big problems that a lot of people have seen, and you were just mentioning it before the show, was it's really destroying your battery life.
Mm-hmm.
The way that they're handling multitasking now is in so many ways better.
It's WebOS.
Well, yeah, it's yeah. The design of this thing is very, very WebOS.
Yes.
Overall, I would say that they stole WebOS. Yeah, it's a much nicer, cleaner design than WebOS was, but it's stolen a lot of that functionality. As did Windows Phone. Windows Phone stole a lot of that functionality as well, which is partially why people are saying they stole Windows Phone. Windows Phone stole from the same guys basically. But it's not WebOS, it's not Android, and it's not Windows Phone. It's its own very unique blend, and I think they've done a pretty good job. But because they've gone to the more liberal multitasking, it is killing the battery. And this is exactly why the earlier versions didn't do this before, is for these, now you've got the processors that you can handle it. The battery is still a problem. Right. But you've got the processors, you've got the RAM, and when they first started putting multitasking into iOS, they really didn't have either of those other things. So now you're just dealing with a battery life, and that's certainly something that you can deal with.
Yeah, how often are you really far away from some sort of power source, be it a large battery or car or outlet?
Yeah, you can certainly always take one of the. I love my external pop-in batteries because they just go right on the back. Flop it on, flop it off, and you're done. But we do have an article that we'll link to for people who are looking to reduce the battery drain, and a lot of it is due to the background syncing. So we'll post a link to that. One of the big things that iOS 7 does improve is the ability to kick the guys who steal the phones right where it counts, because now you can't do the reset that you used to be able to do as well. So when your phone goes stolen, they have a bunch of tools that it won't let you reauthorize or reactivate a UID
Right.
or MEI or any of the identifiers. There's multiple identifiers in that phone that cannot be changed. They're burned into those chips. And if any of those reappear on the network, if it's a phone reported stolen, they can't be reactivated. So they've got that stuff built in. You can't do the resets, to reload it even.
Without a password.
Without the password. So they've really done a lot to make this a more secure phone. So that's a good thing. And there's a bunch of security fixes that they've done, and all kinds of stuff. So this is a major update. It's going to take some getting used to.
Right.
But I think we've talked about iOS 7 way too much for this show. So let's move on to something else that's kind of near and dear to my heart. Expansion technologies, cards and such. And we're just going to touch on this really quickly. Engadget had an article that we'll link to if anyone wants a little bit more information. But we've talked several times on the show about different card formats, and we've got yet another one. It's essentially the successor to the Compact Flash, and this is called CFast 2.0. It's boasting the world's fastest memory card, and they demoed one at 450 megabytes a second.
Wow.
That is a lot.
That can handle full-frame burst photographs without breaking a sweat.
And it can handle the full HD. It can handle 2K. So there's a lot of stuff that this is going to enable, more than anything we've looked at in the past. So, I have a camera that uses the ultra-fast CF cards to do its HD, and it's pushing the limits. There are other cameras that use 2 CF cards in a RAID kind of array to improve the write times. So this is the first card that's going to be able to do it on its own. I'm really excited about the prospects of this. Again, it doesn't really apply to anything that we're talking about here. Just something to be aware of. There's a new, I'm sure, ultra expensive card hitting the market soon that's not going to be compatible with your cameras that you probably have right now, but it is a very exciting technology for the future.
Exactly. But you know what? We got some feedback.
We got a lot of feedback.
We got a lot of feedback. One of them came from, a couple of them actually, came from F1 Driver via Google+. He said, what's new in Ingress? How do I meet players, or how do players meet other players? I'm new. I feel that I need to do more than just drive by portals and hack and recharge.
Yeah, and we haven't talked a whole lot about Ingress in quite a long time now, but they have made a whole bunch of changes, and some of those changes are enough to really change the way the game is played. I actually got back in and started playing with it quite a bit, but it's tough when you've been out of it for a few months to get back in and really understand some of the UI changes they've made.
Yes.
They've made some changes that you can't play by yourself anymore like you used to. You really do need now to work as a team, and that's why it is so much more important now to meet up with those other players. The best ways that I found to connect with the other players in the game is to use the comms, which is the in-app chatting, and you can also use Google+. Take a look on Google+. There's a lot of communities out there, and those are really, really great ways to connect with people. They'll have events that they plan that way, and it is the way, I think, to really get out there and meet and talk with other players in the game.
And I'm seeing a whole lot more of cross-faction meetups and working together, where you'll get people from the Enlightened and the Resistance working together. I've seen them work together to create fields and to help each other out. It seems to be a lot less competitive than when I first started.
Yeah, definitely. You don't have anywhere close to the issues that you had initially with people getting territorial. Though you still have a lot of that, and that is something that really annoys me. But there are, a lot of those cross-faction events, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that they are doing through Niantic those official events where they're having the big, I don't know what to really call them aside from events.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's the story. They're working in the storyline, so people are getting more involved with it, and I think it really does help people, connect on a friendlier level all across all the factions. And even locally, we've had some cross-faction events that are, more like, sports days where you're competing, for points. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do those kind of things, and hopefully people don't get bent out of shape, but it happens, and, we've seen it happen, and we'll continue to see it happen because people get very territorial in that game.
Yes, they do.
Well, before we move on to another topic that was previously submitted, we actually got one from Gary in our Q&A and asked why not the Samsung Rugby. It comes with a hard case, rough diamond back, great in the field with caching. Yeah, and that is a good option. There's a lot of those phones that are coming out. We've talked about that a couple of times that we're very impressed with what's been coming out. The Samsung S4 Mini, I think it is, has a ruggedized version. I'm getting lost because there's so many of these now coming out. Kyocera has some excellent offerings. Most of them aren't as powerful. The Rugby is another one of them it's not as powerful as the current flagship phones. And this is one of the problems that you'll have with any kind of rugged phone is they always seem to be like a step or two behind. It's getting a little bit better. We're seeing more of the current generation phones coming out in those slightly scaled down versions. And that's what I find so intriguing and so gratifying is that we're starting to see those come out in a reasonable time frame for stuff that you'd actually want to use.
Right. This takes us back to my phone blocks where we started earlier. That way you can just upgrade the processor and have the latest.
Yeah, well, exactly. And here's where the problem lay in a lot of these ruggedized waterproof phones. When you start sealing it up, when you start putting all of that extra case around it, that means it's much harder to cool and deal with the phone's internal issues. So that's why you're usually a step behind. You take any of the current generation phones, any of those current generation flagship phones, you start putting a load on them, you'll feel that phone heat up.
Oh, yeah.
So that becomes a big problem.
Yeah. If you ruggedize it, you're sealing all that heat in there and it can't get out. You're going to kill your phone quickly.
Yeah, well, and your battery degrades in performance when that happens. So, yeah, there are so many of these new phones coming out. I have a lot of hope for them. And the one that I mentioned not too long ago that really got me excited was the Sony Z1. If you're anywhere else, or if you're in the U.S., Z1 everywhere else. That one is a waterproof phone that really doesn't make the compromises we've seen with most of those others. So I am really excited about that and looking forward to seeing more of those ruggedized phones from people.
Exactly. I've seen so many examples of simple spray coating that makes your phone completely waterproof, and I haven't seen those come out in production. So
yeah, well, and they haven't worked very well in practice. It's better than nothing, but they haven't worked as well as they'll lead you to believe. So we move on to another question from F1 Driver who had submitted these last week from Google+. And the first part of that was Google Maps are old. I update regularly, and they still route me on the wrong one-way roads. All right, now, my first question is, are you sure you're updating the maps? There's a difference between updating the device and updating the maps. And with Garmin, you have to have a subscription to the map service, usually, to get those updates. Exactly. So if you don't have a subscription or if you haven't bought the new maps, you might have some issues. They're not going to update the maps unless there's a bug.
Right. So they'll update the firmware so that the device runs better, may add new features, but that doesn't touch the maps. And with Garmin, you can buy all the maps on a SD card. I wanted to say CF card. On an SD card that you can put into your device, and then you'll have the updated maps.
Yep. He also continues, oh, and why am I having so much trouble loading custom apps on my Oregon? I've studied GPS File Depot, but I think I need to blame the Garmin software, MapSource and Basecamp, way to not support your stuff. I can't get topos on my GPS. I've moved on, okay with my GPX files and custom maps loaded through Google Earth to GPS. But just saying. All right, well, yes, Garmin has no motivation, shall we say, to support third-party maps. So don't expect them to give you any support whatsoever. They're trying to sell their stuff. Mm-hmm. They have their custom map format that doesn't give you all the features, but it does satisfy the people who want those trail maps and things like that to an extent. But it takes care of that from their perspective, so don't look for the support for the third-party stuff. It's just not going to happen. Mm-mm. Anyone who wants to go the GPS File Depot route, which is a great option, you're pretty much on your own. You just have to work through those issues with the forums, and hopefully you know someone who's had some experience and can help you out with it locally.
Yeah, I've loaded OpenStreetMaps on my Oregon, and it's worked. But it wasn't an easy process.
No, definitely not. Now, the next topic we're going to talk about was actually emailed to us from Jersey Eric, or actually through Google+, and this gets into a lot of what we're going to be talking about on that Getting Good Chords show. So I'm going to read this, but we're not going to get into all of it. And he asked, this might seem like a silly topic, but I'd like to hear how to mark a waypoint, both current location and other chords, in the two major caching apps on each platform, plus the GC.com app. On Android, I switched from Neon Geo to CacheSense a few months ago, and only recently learned how to mark and edit waypoints in CacheSense. A few weeks ago, a cacher I met on the trail asked if I knew how to enter chords for waypoint on the GC.com app for iOS, and I didn't know. All right. What we're going to talk about isn't getting the points in there so much, but you asked about marking a waypoint in that, which I assume meant trying to find the location you're at. So you want to place a cache there. The short of it is the official GC.com apps don't support that feature at all. There is no support. Groundspeak does not want you to use the apps to place caches. So that's intentionally not there. The problem is it also means you can't mark your car or anything else with the app, which could be a problem. However, there is a sort of workaround in that you can take a screenshot of the compass screen with the current coordinates, and that will give you a good idea of where you're at and allow you to save it. So that's about the only way that I can think of to make the GC.com apps work for marking a coordinate.
Yeah, it's not an easy way to do it. We'll talk more on the upcoming show, but yeah, there are ways to work around that on the GC.com.
Yeah. So don't count on it being effective is the bottom line. But if you're actually talking about the multi-caches and that kind of thing, that's a little different, and there is a way to do that, and I believe it's the same on all of the official apps, whether it be Windows Phone, Android, or iOS. There's a little flag icon that you have to hit from within usually the navigate screen. They may have changed this on some of them with the recent updates, but it's a flag icon that allows you to add another stage, and then you can put in your chords. I don't like the way they used to do it. I haven't worked with it enough in the current version to say how well or badly it works, and that is now for iOS and for Android that they've changed it. So again, I don't really want to get into it too much, but the short of it is look for the flag icon. That's where you get to mark those.
More feedback comes from Super Ted. He sent us an email that says, here are some questions I have to use on the Randomize show. or just addressed to you guys offline, or just for the delete button. I'm heading over to Michigan on business at the end of October, and I hope to do a bit of caching, specifically some older caches that may help me fill in my Jasmer Challenge grid. I just picked up a nearly new Nexus 7, the original version, on eBay. Avoided the one after hearing Bad Cop's comments on the GPS dropping off. I bought it for use in the field, etc. Question, what's the simplest and cheapest place to pick up a data-only SIM card when I arrive in Michigan? Well, Daryl, since you're in Michigan, I'm going to leave this one to you.
All right. Well, the answer actually largely depends on where you're going to be in Michigan. And based on the description of where he was going to be in an area that didn't have as good coverage. And we should also mention right off the bat that when he's mentioning the SIM card, that means he's on a GSM network, which is one of the reasons that it's really awesome to have a GSM-capable phone. Even if you're not a GSM carrier subscriber here in the States, you can get some of the phones that are multi-band and will have the SIM support from carriers like Verizon, who are CDMA. Here in the U.S., your two main carriers that are GSM is T-Mobile and AT&T. T-Mobile tends not to have the coverage, so AT&T is better for people who are looking to go outside of the major cities, because that's most of the time where you're going to get the better coverage. And he was actually talking, he wants to go to some of the more remote locations, and for that reason, he's probably looking at one of the AT&T network SIMs. I'm not 100% sure that the Nexus 7 supports all of the right bands for AT&T in the range that he's looking at, but it's probably going to work pretty well. There are a couple of the prepaid carriers that use the AT&T network. A couple of them are actually owned by AT&T GoPhone, and Straight Talk, which is actually an MVNO, only accessible through Walmart, are the two that I could come up with real quick. You can still get it through AT&T, but this is not as easy here in the States as it is in other countries. You know, European travelers are pretty used to being able to just walk out of the plane at the airport, go to a vending machine, pick up a prepaid SIM card, pop it in, and they're done. It's a little bit more complicated here in the U.S., so you probably want to do your homework before you come over, but there are vending machines for those SIM cards. I would imagine the international terminals will have those, so it's not all lost.
No, it's not all lost, but that, and considering he's coming from overseas, I assume all Nexus 7 have the same GSM radios in them, and we're not looking at different radios from Europe to America. So,
oh, absolutely, yeah.
That was my thought.
All Nexus 7s have the same radio, and the issue had been in some areas, some of the Nexus devices, particularly the Nexus 4, had problems, but even the Nexus 7 had some issues on AT&T in some areas because they were using bands that weren't supported by the device, and I don't remember what that is.
Okay.
Most of the time, you're going to be good. Moving on to another question, though, from Gary, again through that live Q&A. Thank you for watching us and dropping those in there. He asked, are there now or coming up any GPSR units that are primarily a GPS but will also have bare bones emergency type phones? To the best of my knowledge, no, there are not, and I don't believe you're going to see that for a whole host of reasons, primarily certification.
Yeah.
What I can recommend, though, is if you're looking for that bare bone emergency phone, check out the Spare One phone, which is available from, I want to say that was an Energizer device.
I think so.
Now, do you remember what that is, Bad Cop?
It's an older style phone, run on AA batteries, right?
Yeah, you got it. It's very simply a candy bar phone that runs on a single lithium AA battery, and because it runs on that single AA lithium, it runs for 10, or it will last on the shelf for 10 years. It's a little bit more durable than your typical phone would be. it's kind of a throwaway as cheap as this thing is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I want to say it's $100, which really isn't that cheap when we're used to the on-contract pricing for phones.
Exactly.
But it doesn't even come with a SIM. You can pop into your SIM if you want it, but because it doesn't have that SIM, it's only good for making those emergency calls. If you pop a SIM in, then it becomes a regular phone, and, well, I don't think I'd want a AA-powered phone if I was going to be using the phone, but that might be something to look at. So hopefully that will solve your problem. It is a second device, but that also means you don't have to worry about killing the battery in that emergency device. So I keep thinking about getting one of these for myself, just, that peace of mind. But, yeah, geez, I don't want to rely on that.
Right. And you can use things like the Spot and other things, to use in emergency services, or to get emergency services when you're outside of a normal cell phone range.
Yeah, absolutely. And those aren't quite the same as having the phone, and in some ways they're better, some ways they're worse, but those do require that you have the data service, essentially, the tracking services from them. So that does cost money, and it's an extra device to carry as well.
Right.
So there's nothing that fits exactly what you're asking for, but there are some options to look at. Now, before we go, we'll answer one last question from Super Ted that was also in that same email, and quite simply, how do I change my profile picture in Wallaby? Bad Cop, you want to field that one?
Sure. It's easier than you think it would be. From the far left tab at the bottom with your name, tap on your avatar photo. For you, it'll be blank, gray silhouette looking one. And you get three options. You can choose a photo, take a photo, or cancel. So if it's not working, you may need to force quit, relaunch the app, but it's just that simple.
Yeah, it really couldn't be any easier than that. And thank you again for writing in to everyone who has. And thanks for everyone who's in the live Q&A who submitted questions, including F1 Driver, who actually thanked us in there for answering his questions today.
So he's listening live as we're answering his questions and then thanking us in the Q&A for answering his questions.
I have to admit, I really do like the Q&A, though. It is a little confusing, and we do have some issues to work on yet. And we still have a lot more topics that we didn't touch on this week, so we've got a nice head start for the next Randomize show. You can always call in or write in those questions, any comments, any feedback. We got some feedback live on the show this time through that live Q&A. But certainly, write in or let us know through a voicemail any kind of feedback on this show or any of the upcoming shows. Next week might be that Getting Good Chords show. It might also be the Halloween events. I'm kind of hoping for the Halloween events because that's kind of cool and timely.
Exactly. Get it in time to get that information and plan your Halloween event.
Exactly. In 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking night caches with John Robb again. Always a great guest to have on the show. We're really looking forward to him. And I'm pretty excited to get some history of podcasting from Rob Walsh, great old-time podcaster. One of the few podcasters who I can say has been podcasting for longer than I have. And then if we don't do the Good Chords show next week, we'll be doing that in 3 weeks. So we've got a whole bunch of good shows for people to check out, and send in all of that feedback, comments, questions, and we'd love to hear, like for that history of podcasting, what was the first show that you listened to and the first one that you got involved with, and why did you get involved with it? For those night caching shows, let us know what the great night caches are that you've done, and anything that you might want to try when you're night caching, or even better, give us your tips if you have a night cache show.
There you go. You can check the Cacheamaniacs website at cacheamaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647, by emailing geogearheads at cacheamaniacs.com, or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cacheamaniacs shows coming, so please consider making a PayPal donation through the link on our website to support these Cacheamaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. This show's copyright 2013 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.